A Western drone was flying over the Black Sea. It is proposed to be from NATO, potentially American, and Russia is being allegedly is being accused of taking down that drone. So this would be, let's say, a light act of war. I mean, we're already in a proxy war. Now, there's conflicting stories here, and also a video has come out. So on the video, it looks like there's a jet flying by the drone, and it's spraying fuel onto the drone, and it damages part of the drone, but we don't see the drone go down and crash. And this is different from the Western story, slightly different in a sense that the Russian fighter jet had attacked the drone, and the drone had fell and crashed into the water. Now, we're seeing propaganda on both sides, and so we need to understand there's Western propaganda, there's Eastern propaganda. By the way, just looking at the video, if people want to look it up, it looks like a video game. Now, I know video games look realistic now. People know Forza, the car game. It looks extremely realistic, but this looked worse than Forza. This looked like a simulation type of game. Now, I'm not saying it's fake, but just to propose the idea to people, it's not uncommon to see a deepfake or artificial intelligence create a video and make it look extremely realistic to the point where the majority of people can't interpret it as fake. And this poses a huge problem potentially in the legal system for doctored audio and video. But moving aside from that, we're seeing two sides of propaganda in the East and in the West. Now, the majority of the public in the West, they're going to take the mainstream narrative surface level value and attack Russia, attack the East for certain actions that are happening. And the vice versa is true. The people in the East, they're going to look at the West with the information that they have in their media and say the West is at fault for this conflict. Now, to break down the news cycle, because this is just another piece of news that we're receiving about the conflict in Eastern Europe. There's a micro news cycle and a macro news cycle. I'll explain both. Now, I typically focus on macro politics, but I also cover micro politics, at least for the first few minutes of these videos, and then I go into the macro. But when we look at the macro politics, let's use an event. Let's say there's an event that is being thrown into the news cycle. This event may last 6 months to 10 years. And that's a long period of time. Now, whatever the event is, it serves certain interests. It could be a conflict overseas, and that is necessary to prop up the military-industrial complex. It's necessary to prop up not just fueling the war machine, like I mentioned, but fueling other industries that are tied to it, reconstruction of a certain area. So now you have different industries going into those areas, financial institutions that are going to invest money into those areas and potentially indirectly use taxpayer money to do that. And then you have the politicians who get elected on behalf of the people because there's public sentiment, and they're sympathizers of making sure that whatever conflict is taken care of however they see fit. So you have this event 6 months to 10 years. I'm giving a very wide range of time because that's more macro. Now, to create interest, to stimulate interest with the public, you have to create micro news cycles, because if you just have the same news for 6 months to 10 years, that's very boring to the general public. You have to create a story. You have to create emotion. And so you'll create certain events. Maybe they're real, maybe they're fabricated, maybe they're real, but you leverage it, and so you make it, you make it hyperbole. You exaggerate the event. I was going to say hyperbole, but you make the event larger than what it seems. And so when you take a micro event, that could be on a weekly basis. This happened on Tuesday, this happened on Friday, this happened on Sunday. You're reporting the news, but these micro events are tied to the macro political event. This is all in an effort to gain public sentiment for a certain event, to continue to fuel the event. If the majority of your population does not agree with whatever the event is, whatever the conflict is overseas, it is very hard to generate funds. It's very hard to generate support. It's very hard to get elected on behalf of that event, where you're using that event as a proxy to get an office or to gain power. So you have to stimulate emotion. You have to stimulate storytelling. You have to create that event as something that people should care about, and you have to make it somewhat relevant to their lives, or if not relevant, it's a form of entertainment, a way to garnish views and attention. And so this news cycle changes from time to time. Notice how there's always something on the news that is relevant to a bigger picture, a bigger event. And this bigger event we've seen in the past, we can use the Afghanistan war, for example, the Afghanistan conflict, since Congress did not officially declare war, although it was a war, just indirectly played, that we were there for 2 decades. So we had 2 decades of news popping in and out about what was going on over there. So, oh, there's poppy fields. Oh, this is what's happening with the Taliban. Oh, girls are not able to go to school. You have to stimulate that emotion. You have to make the news cycle, the news stories fresh for the decades that you're going to be in that event. This is no different. I'm not saying we're particularly using a strategic news cycle with this event, but I am saying that it is possible, it is plausible. And so when we evaluate these situations, a lot of people may come in and say, well, we're in America. This is the land of the free. I understand how China would do it with their 3 news television shows, or how Russia would do it with their 2 state media shows. But America, we have all these different channels. We're democratically electing people. We have a president. We put him in office. We're able to voice our opinions without being prosecuted. This is not happening in America. You're delusional. All this is happening overseas in other countries. Let's not forget, humans are humans. The people who run America are not any different than the humans in other places. We can say we have American values, but of course those have been degrading for decades. Even since the inception of the United States of America, there have been people chipping away at individual rights. So we also need to understand that within systems, within governments, from the outside, from the surface level, it looks like you have stable representatives. But behind the scenes, that nation may be compromised. There may be sociopathic or psychopathic people who love money, status, fame, and power, and they don't care about the collateral that they need to create to achieve that power. And if you look at a niche like politics, politics is the peak of society in terms of power. When you're able to use force as the ultimate authority over what people can and can't do, that is the ultimate power. And so you'll have people who will pursue these positions, and they can do it in a very charismatic way, or at least it looks charismatic to the majority of people. But to the minority of people, it's not very charismatic. I suppose if you're taking the average person, it's not that hard to be slightly better than the average person in terms of charisma, in terms of cunning, in terms of being clever, in terms of strategy. Just the average person. So if we have 330 million people in this country, if you're just better than slightly average, and you have certain tendencies about you, and you want to chase power, well, you're going to find certain niches at the top of hierarchies to pursue. And when we look at our current government, if we're looking at our Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, our founding documents, our American values, our American principles that this country was founded on, everything that made this country the superpower of the world, we are seeing that our elected and unelected politicians, and unelected just means there are different agencies within the federal, within the executive branch in specific, who we do not elect, but they're appointed by our elected officials. All these people, or a good majority of these people, because you have some good people in there, they are not doing what elected or indirectly elected folks should be doing if they cared about we the people. If you look at their actions, not their words, if you look at what political policy they're passing, if you look at the kind of regulation that they're passing, if you look at the laws that they are or are not enforcing, if you look at the legislation that they're adjusting, look at people's actions and you will see how much they truly care about you. Now, once we understand that, of course, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter if we go back 1,000 years or forward 1,000 years. There's always going to be deception in the media. And the media serves as a way to distribute information, but oftentimes, in 99% of the history, historically speaking, not just in America, but in the world in general, that information has been used to deceive the population towards a certain narrative that fueled the interests of the people at the top of the hierarchy. And it just doesn't have to be at the top of the political hierarchy. It could be at the top of any kind of hierarchy that you can imagine. It could be big med, big pharma. Doesn't really matter. So once we understand that, we can see how there's macro politics, and certain events align on that macro political timeline. And then you have to trigger emotion, trigger public sentiment through micro politics, micro events. And although they may be interesting, and some are real, fabricated, some are over leveraged, some are exaggerated, it's important to understand that this all ties to a bigger picture. once you understand the bigger picture, all these little micro events don't matter as much. They matter in the sense of, oh, they're trying to move the needle here. And when we see that they're trying to move the needle, there has to be the minority of people who actually care about individual rights, who actually care about we the people, to push that needle back, to preserve individual rights, to preserve our humanity, to preserve human rights in general. People like to talk about free healthcare, or well, let's clarify. People like to talk about the right to education, the right to healthcare. Okay, great, let's do it. The problem is those folks who are saying that they want better healthcare, better education, they're aligning themselves with people who do not care about that, even though they say they do. You're being overtly deceived, covertly as well. But the people who are advocating for education, better healthcare, they can't see right in front of their noses how there are people who will tell you sweet words, but then right in front of your eyes, commit an action that goes against what they just told you.